To Be an Adventurer, authored by Gail Ovan, narrated by Gail Ovan. Chapter 3. Rota took his first steps into the unknown. The contrast between the city and the forest was evident. The forest and the city were not separated by anything. It was like an imaginary line, like a portal, where one side is a bright, busy metropolis with a million different things and colors all fighting for your attention, and the other side was a dingy, dark forest with seemingly nothing of importance going on. The imaginary line split the path he was walking on. The nice cobbled road he walked on turned to dirt. All of this felt weird to Rota. The shade of the overhanging trees gave the forest an eerie feeling. Still, Rota walked on. After walking around for a while, he realized how truly unprepared he was. He had no equipment, no tools, and no skills. One thing that he did have, though, was an education. Not a good one, but one that should hopefully suffice. He realized that the only thing he had to eat this morning was a piece of bread. He decided to look for berries. He looked for what felt like, and probably was, many hours. He didn't struggle to find plants, or berries, just ones that he recognized and trusted. Eventually, he did find something. It was a small patch of berries native to the Forsaken realm of the Larray kingdom. Unfortunately, he found them second. They were being guarded by a Veek, a large rodent the size of a baby deer. The Veek have large teeth and claws. They are fat creatures with small heads. Their eyes, though seemingly far apart, give them excellent field of view. They are seen as a sign of bad luck in Larray, especially for unsuspecting adventurers. It is said that a Veek could tear a human to shreds within 12 seconds of sinking their teeth into them. They also love berries. Rota knew how dangerous the Veek could be, and decided that he would slowly back away and not cause conflict. It was too late. The Veek had already seen him. The Veek lunged at Rota. Rota turned around and ran as quickly as possible. Rota then remembered something that he'd learned while still at school. The Veek are fast, much faster than most humans. Realizing that he will not be able to outrun the animal, Rota leapt behind a large tree for cover. Rota then looked around on the ground for something that he could use. His eyes scanned frantically for something. He knew that he only had a second before the Veek would be there. He saw a tree branch. It wasn't too heavy. It was actually very frail looking. He didn't have any more time. He grabbed the stick and turned to face the Veek. The Veek was standing there, with its pounce prepared. It lunged at Rota once more. Rota swung the branch with all his might. He hit the Veek in midair as the stick snapped upon impact. He looked into the creature's eyes for the first time. They were primal, full of hatred. The look the animal gave him paralyzed Rota in fear. Rota couldn't move an inch. The Veek began to get back up, maintaining his eye contact with Rota. Rota knew that the animal getting back up was a terrible idea, and that the Veek could easily maul him. Rota was then forced to make a decision, face the beast or be killed by it. His mind was racing, trying to get his body to move. Eventually, Rota bit the inside of his cheek and ran towards the Veek. He kicked the beast's head into the large tree beside him. He then ran, faster than he ever knew he could. He didn't look back, scared that the Veek would still be behind him. He grabbed a couple of berries from the bush and ran away, hoping that he would be able to lose the Veek. Rota ran and ran. He didn't even once look back. Only once his heart felt that it was about to explode and his lungs were too weak to get air did Rota collapse to the ground. He looked behind him. There was nothing. Nothing at all was chasing him. He was safe, though his chest didn't feel the same way. Rota took a second to calm down, remembering something that his father had told him. Make sure you are breathing, not because adventurers often forget, but because you can't make a half-decent decision while winded. After his encounter with the Veek, Rota had a newfound respect for Moltoka. He missed him, and his silly humor that only someone who had never heard a joke before would find funny. Once Rota's breathing was finally regulated, he reached into his pocket and pulled out the berries that he had grabbed from the bush earlier. Rota decided that it was time for a break. He sat down under a shaded tree and began to eat the berries. Even after eating the berries, Rota still sat there, entranced by the beauty of everything. The forest was peaceful, at least whenever a Veek wasn't around. The serenity of the wilderness took Rota away as his tired body fell asleep. Rota awoke several hours later. He stood up and took a deep breath. He looked upwards to see where the sun was, but the trees were blocking his sight. Realizing that he had no idea what time it was, and that he might have just slept most of the day away, he began walking again, hoping that he would make it to the next town before sunset. Rota was very upset when it began to get dark only a couple of minutes later. A couple of hours later, Rota was tired, but he could finally see the light of the town on the path ahead of him. As he had this thought, he heard a noise. It was a shuffling noise on the gravel behind him, like someone was following him. The footsteps were louder and faster than Rota's. He turned around and froze. His nerves were still on edge from his encounter with the Vik earlier that day. He saw in the distance 2 floating green orbs. They were rapidly approaching. Rota, again paralyzed with fear, stood there unsure of what to do. The orbs grew larger as they got closer. Rota realized what they were. They were eyes. Eyes that were not at all dissimilar to a Vik's. Rota ran. He had no time to think. Rota knew that he could have died to the Vik he saw this morning. Whatever was following him now was certainly more than a dozen times larger. Rota ran into the town. Once he had made it a safe distance, he looked behind him towards the beast. The beast didn't dare walk into the light. It just stayed slightly outside of the realm of visibility. It let out a burdened, heavy, and aspirated groan. The door to a nearby house opened, and out came an old man with a magical item in hand. He pointed it at the monster, and it made a loud bang. Sparks shot out from the barrel of the torch-shaped object. The monster turned and fled. The old man turned towards Rota and yelled, "Boy, get in here!" Rota listened and came inside. Immediately as Rota entered the house, the old man pointed to a chair set at the table. "Sit, boy," the man said. Rota did as he was told. The man looked towards his concerned wife and said, "This is nothing. Let me handle it." He then turned back towards Rota and began questioning him. "You're not from around here. Where are you from? What's your name?" Rota answered his first question immediately. "I am from Purple City." Rota thought for a second about how he no longer wished to be associated with the Harian name. "My name is Rota." "What's your family name? Down south in your so-called noble realm, nearly everyone has one," the man said. He squinted his eyes towards Rota. Rota began to sweat. The old man in front of him clearly wasn't very trusting. Rota did not know what to say. He figured that he wasn't a good liar, so he should just try to be honest. "It's a family matter. I don't really talk to them. I'm not really part of it anymore." The man pressed his lips together. "So, that's why a boy your age would be traveling alone with no protection. You're running away." Rota paused. He had never thought of it that way. Was he running away? Surely not. He has nothing to run away from. The man sighed, breaking the silence that Rota's thoughts had let into the room. "You'll sleep in there." The man pointed to a room located on the wall behind him. "Shiro will make you breakfast in the morning." He pointed to his wife. "We wake at daybreak." Rota was confused at this old man's hospitality. The man hadn't been nice for a second since Rota had met him, but Rota decided to play along, seeing as his only alternative was to sleep outside. He stood up, thanked the man and his wife, and began to walk to his room. The man grabbed him on the shoulder and told him one last thing. "Don't make me regret this, noble." Rota went into his room and laid down on his bed. He wasn't at all tired. He had already slept enough that day. He just laid there, staring at the ceiling. He thought about how this was what his father did every day, how everything that he owned was gained through adventuring. His father would leave town, fight some monster, and hopefully get paid. Rota felt some tears developing in his eyes. He was very close with his father. Even so, he sometimes wished that his father would get better at his job and make some more money. Now he realized exactly how hard being an adventurer truly was. And now he had no clue what tomorrow would bring.